Hi everyone, really nice to see you all here. My name's Christina, I'm a primary mental health worker for the north of CAMHS, and my base is in Aldershot CAMHS, but I also spend some of my time triaging new referrals that come into the service, and that's sort of looking at the whole of the north of Hampshire.
And my name is Philippa Brewer. I'm a mental health practitioner and also part of the family therapy team in CAMHS. And I work in the part of CAMHS where we're sort of providing treatment and intervention for young people who are experiencing mental health difficulties. So today we are going to be looking at anxiety management. So it is just a whistle-stop tour of, and over to Christine.
Yeah, so I guess a bit about the structure of the talk. We're going to touch a bit about on what anxiety actually is, then we're going to talk about the signs and the symptoms, and then we're going to think about a few tools or a few simple strategies that might help. And very briefly we'll touch on resources, but please feel free to go to our stall where you'll be able to take some leaflets with really helpful resources on anxiety. So, also forgot to say, if anything isn't clear or requires a bit extra explanation, please just feel free to say so, and we'll do our best to answer your questions as we go along. We'd like to make it as interactive as possible as well, so please feel free to just chip in. So, what is anxiety? What other words do we have for anxiety? Some of those will be worry, some of those will be fear, I guess the more intense, intensified feeling. It might be a bit of tension, it might look a bit like distress, but not really a significant, worry episode that is stopping us from doing anything. So anxiety is a bit like a spectrum as well, and throughout that spectrum it can intensify or lessen. So the first important bit that I wanted to talk to you about was a little bit about why we've got this ability to experience worry and experience fear, and sort of from a survival point of view, how important a skill that is and how it's kept us alive for thousands and thousands of years. The ability to seek out threats within our environment and to detect them and effectively escape the danger has successfully preserved our species for a very, very long time. And not only, we're now probably on the top of the hierarchy of creatures on this planet, and that is exactly because of our ability to escape those dangers and effectively learn from dangerous situations and things that can be harmful to us. So if you allow me to take you thousands of years back, essentially the ancestors that we descend directly from had the best anxiety alarm systems in them, and as we move along across time, the threats and danger immediately would have reduced, but our inbuilt triggers and alarm bells would have just remained. So we find ourselves in a bit of a situation where sometimes we might worry about things that aren't actually even physically dangerous to us. And I've got a quick clip to show you to try and illustrate this point. So why do we get anxious, as I said previously, is in order to survive, to keep ourselves safe. And actually, that video with the little baby, the whole point of us putting it there is just to illustrate that it's so ingrained within our physiology and our very unconscious functioning. We don't even have to think about it. It's an automatic response within our bodies that alarms us to the threat and danger that we want to escape from. And that's another picture to illustrate the same concept. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how babies learn certain coping skills actually, and in the context of anxiety. And I want to show you another video to do with that. And apologies if the sound is a bit rubbish. We've had a bit of a technical issue with connecting it to the speakers, so I do apologise about that.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity, the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying years ago. When people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. And it still faces experiment that the mother did, when she sits down and she's playing with her babies, not your baby, and she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places of the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking at her. She points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening?" She makes that screechy sound that the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes when they don't get normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
It's a very powerful, and apologies for the lack of volume, but it's called the still face experiment. If you Google it, then you'll be able to perhaps get a sort of, get the dialogue as well to go with it. But it's just illustrating actually the distress when they were in communication. Baby was learning and being happy and interacting obviously with mum. As soon as mum stopped interacting, you saw the levels of distress in the baby, and well, to start with, the baby trying to get mum's attention, and then the building distress that followed. And we're going to be coming on a little bit later about actually the importance of social communication and learning with regards to kind of managing anxiety.
Mm-hmm. So I guess just to reiterate how a parent might respond to threats or danger or anxiety in general will be picked up, not just if it's picked up from the babies. You can imagine with the more sophisticated teenager that's had a lot of time to think and grow and intellectually develop, how attuned they would be to picking that up. And unfortunately, a lot of the time we see that by that point, the way that they would respond to threat and danger and anxiety would be quite ingrained and almost automatized. So, yeah, I guess that was the whole point of that.
It is, and I think it is, as you said, the power of that, that social interaction and the learning. And although that we've got obviously the examples of babies, that learning continues, and our children, as they go through, 5 or 6, they are still seeking us out with regards to helping them learn and experience their world and making sense of it. And even I've got teenagers, they will be looking at, to me as well, about how I'm handling stressful situations. And again, it's a constant interaction of learning and developing. So our bodies are on the lookout, constantly for potential incoming threat signals to protect us from danger. So I will go out, and if I'm trying to cross the road, if I'm not looking properly and I step out into the road and I see a car, my automatic response is that I will step back, and that will trigger in me certainly a sense of I will feel stress, relief, I will feel my heart beating, but that is where my that alarm system is activated, as it should have done, to keep me safe. However, there can be lots of triggers for that alarm system in our brain to be triggered, and for anxiety to be cause difficulty in our life, and there can be lots of different kinds of triggers. And this is where I'm wondering from you guys in the audience, whether you've got any, what triggers have you been aware of, whether they are from your own children or children you work with, that may cause that alarm system, that anxiety alarm system, to be triggered.
You could do even better if.
Yes, yeah, okay. So it's sort of the pressures with regards to sort of academic,
What you're doing is okay, but it doesn't meet my
expectations. Right. So absolutely. So I'll just bring them all up, because there are worries about everything and anything, and I think that's it. Things like schoolwork, not being able to achieve enough, is obviously really, really key. Any other possible triggers that people have noticed or perhaps experienced in themselves? I mean, in the triggers that we have here, obviously there is, and within CAMHS, we sort of rather categorise different types of anxiety. So there is social, and we would see social anxiety as slightly separately to more generalised anxiety. So the often for young people that we would see, perhaps being able to socialise can actually cause, huge amount of stress. Going to a party might not even be possible. There can be performances. It's also bearing in mind a little bit of anxiety and stress. It can be good for our as well and help us achieve. But it's what we're looking at is those triggers that actually tip it into sort of unhealthy and unhelpful territory. Separation anxiety, often, young children will really struggle with separating from their parents or another loved one. So these are all the different kinds of triggers that can be that can cause problems. So what are the signs of anxiety? So we've got 3 different areas to consider. The thoughts, what's happening, and perhaps it's kind of, perhaps referring to your own experience of things that perhaps you're worried about, but the thoughts, any ideas, what's happening to the thoughts when you're anxious?
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure, yeah.
It's a really common theme, particularly with teenagers, I think, and the amount of pressures, as you mentioned. And the expectations not just from parents and caregivers, but also from their peers and within their social group. So yes, absolutely, being scared to say.
So a thought in that instance could be, I'm going to fail this exam. I'm not going to do it. I can't go and do this exam today because I'm not going to do it. I haven't done enough revision. Yeah. Those are the kind of thought.
I'm stupid is a really common one. I can't do it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. First, when the trigger could be fairness, you always put your sign on fair, and you can see it's unfair, so many levels of things, and
causing him to feel anxious. So he recognizes
sport. He's fair, he always follows the rules, but 2 or 3 kids don't do that. And still
Why should he then bother even make an effort,
on
isn't it?
everyone.
Or even when someone else is being challenging, that can be really anxiety provoking in itself for some children. And you know, it's actually a beautiful characteristic to be really sensitive, because the benefits of that are that you're very conscientious, you consider lots of ideas, you might think very abstractly, and you're very caring, but the downsides are that you're probably more prone to being more anxious because you're so acutely aware of absolutely everything and everyone's doings. And if you have a very strong fear of justness and fairness, then that's going to be an issue. Yeah, absolutely right. Okay.
My daughter has problems with, well, she's got quite significant problems, but she's, if there's other children misbehaving, she just shuts down. And she's in a special needs school, so a lot of the children misbehave. So she's got muted and she doesn't speak at all.
Okay,
So her anxiety is just totally drowning her.
And does she talk at home after?
Yes.
Okay, so it's very selective, isn't it?
Yes, it's
and
selective mutism.
and it is a symptom of severe
So
anxiety.
she's not joining in classes, she's not learning anything. She's been there 3 years and she's learned nothing.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a way of her saying that she doesn't feel safe. Yeah, and that's absolutely fits in with everything that we are talking today. And we can consider that a behaviour, I guess. That wouldn't be a thought. That would be one of the behaviours that we
And
might
also
see.
things like P.E.E., anything where she's got to get in an environment where she has to move about or be humiliated. Everything, she's worried about everything, that everyone's going to laugh at her. She's 15 now. I thought she might go over it, but it's actually got worse.
Well, you say that at the age of 15 is when you become the most self-aware due to adolescence and due to hormones and due to the way that your brain is wired. And actually we know that that part of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of self-referential information and encoding and perception, is the most active during those years. So it's constantly flashing in their brains, teenagers. Me compared to my peers, to my parents, to the situation. Everything goes to a reference to the self. So actually, if there was an underlying issue before she reached the adolescence years, that might have very likely exacerbated it if she's very self-conscious anyway.
So yes, being laughed at, fear of failure, peers misbehaving. So what kind of physical feelings do you think people who are experiencing anxiety experience?
Feeling sick is
Sickness?
Yeah, very common theme for us in CAMHS. Yeah. Migraine, headaches. Yeah. Sweats, yeah. Yeah. And I guess how much of that is normal when you feel anxious for your... My palms are sweaty right now because I'm in front of you all having to talk to you about, you know, one of the things that I'm really passionate about and I really want to get across the point, but I'm also quite okay anxious because I'm managing to go through a bit, so it's not stopping me, my anxiety, from actually engaging in doing the task at hand.
It's actually caused my daughter to have a seizure.
Oh,
Is
gosh.
that significant?
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
gosh. Yeah.
It's really got quite bad.
When breathing gets dysregulated, isn't it, and not enough oxygen going to the brain, we can get that happening, absolutely.
And I mean, sometimes for young people it is useful just to think what is happening to the body when this, you know, alarm system is being activated. And what is happening is the brain is being flooded with adrenaline. So sometimes when a young person knows what we, know that no one has died from having too much, that flood of adrenaline, and we will be coming on to that a little bit later with regards to the anxiety curve. But actually, when that adrenaline is produced, the blood flow is taken away from the digestive system, hence the feeling sick or needing to go to the loo, that kind of thing, and goes to our hands and our feet, ready for that kind of fight or flight, response. So sometimes with older children, it's actually sometimes talking about, whoa, there goes the adrenaline. I'm now, because I'm an adult, I obviously work in mental health, very aware is when my brain is having a little bit of a release of that and the physical kind of experiences and sensations that gives. So sometimes just naming it can be can prove helpful.
Yeah, really diffusing actually,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well done, sorry. I knew there was something missing on that slide. So the behaviours, so here we have these thoughts, you know, either fear of failing, what, you know, I'm going to look stupid, or I'm not good enough, all those things. There's going to be those really distressing, the physical feelings of anxiety are horrible. They are real, they're not imagined, they are real. But what does that do to behaviour? Sorry? Withdrawal.
Yeah, withdrawal.
Absolutely, and it's then, which leads on to often avoidance, which is the biggest and kind of almost anxiety's worst enemy, because yes, you feel like that, all those wobbly legs and, you know, feeling sick, wanting to go to the loo, those kind of things. You won't want to do that activity or go to that place again, but actually that avoidance means your brain doesn't have the experience, a bit like with the baby, learning and exploring, that actually their life isn't at risk in doing those, perhaps going to that party, and they don't have that experience for their brain to realise that actually that alarm system is being triggered unnecessarily.
Hence the anxiety not only just stays, but it grows, because you haven't learned that it's okay and it's safe, and every time you avoid that situation, that really gets ingrained in you. No, that's a real danger situation, I'm not going into it. And actually, the opposite, trying it out, is what helps and what reduces anxiety. So when is it actually that anxiety becomes a problem? I should have told you all this. So when come on then, that's a good time to really show your knowledge. When is it a problem? Anxiety. Getting out of bed in the morning, yeah?
Yeah, functioning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just going into unusual circumstances, or even immediate circumstances, if something happens that just trigger the kind of, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. So it's almost like getting yourself in a state of feeling really powerless as well, isn't it? It's quite a lot of desperation alongside all of this. When anxiety has debilitated or stopped you from engaging in activities. And I guess that's exactly when it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem when you can no longer do the things that you want to and have to, because you are feeling so anxious that you just cannot engage with that activity. So yeah, some of the examples we've already spoken about. Not wanting to go to school is one that we hear really, really often. In CAMHS, making new friends, talking to people. So that, yeah, they're a really, really common one.
So why does it keep showing up? So our behaviour will actually often be maintaining the anxiety. So we've touched on, haven't we, if school is feeling uncomfortable, if school is generating those horrible physical feelings, and you don't go to school, then that becomes, you know, it's not going to help it, and it just maintains it. What we also notice a lot in CAMHS is when one thing becomes an area of avoidance, other areas become areas of avoidance as well. So it's very easy for things to snowball, that maybe it's not wanting to go to 1 or 2 lessons, to then not going to school at all if things aren't managed, to then sometimes young people not wanting to leave the house at all. So it's just being really, really mindful about the avoidance trap. And it's also obviously about the way we think.
So yeah, really, really important thing is to consider, I guess, a really important concept to consider is the link between our thoughts, our feelings, the physical sensations in our body, and our behaviour. And this is at the very crux of cognitive behaviour therapy, which cognitive stands for the thinking bit, and behaviour is for behaviour, obviously. And the idea is that all of these domains within our functioning influence each other really significantly, and making change in one domain can make a change in another one. Right? So the example that we've got here is Jess didn't understand something in class and wanted to ask a question. Some of the thoughts that Jess might be having are, everyone's looking at me, they will think I'm stupid, they all know the answer, I'm stupid. Feelings that might come alongside that would be anxious, maybe a mixture of sad as well. If she thinks that everyone in her class is looking at her and she's feeling really self-conscious, then some of the physical sensations will be the heart racing, her breathing becoming shallow, having really butterflies in your tummy. And what she might do is actually look down or hide her face in a way to sort of try and escape and hide. Yeah, so that's just one example. And I wanted to do an example with you guys actually. And the situation, let's go with, if you're in bed at night, you've been in bed for a couple of hours, all of a sudden you hear a noise downstairs and you know that that isn't another member of the family, right? What thoughts might you be having in that moment?
Terror.
So?
Terror.
Terror, is that a thought?
No, it's a feeling. It's
Oh,
feeling.
okay.
Yeah, but with what terror? With that, yeah.
Okay. What is it? What is that? Okay, so that would be one thought. So we don't know what it is. What is it? Any other thoughts? Is no one anxious in here at all about burglars?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I might think to myself, oh my gosh, so right, I thought I'd locked, I haven't got a cat, I haven't got dogs, like who's coming to my house? Okay, that might be one.
I would be, is
it a burglar? Maybe I'm just overly sensitive, I don't know. Okay, any other thoughts? No?
We could be worried about what you're going to do. You wouldn't know in your head, you know, I must be a burglar, what am I going to do? My kids safe, is my stuff safe?
So it really like snowballs, doesn't it, almost? Just getting that one initial
What
thought.
have I got? What's around the bedroom? What can I write to you?
From is it a burglar, it's become...
Should I phone the police?
Yeah.
Do I check first before I call the police?
Yeah, absolutely. And from is it a burglar, it's become, oh, it's a burglar, how am I going to deal with it, right? And the discrepancy is quite significant. And if we've already got the thought that it's a burglar, terror, feeling of terror would most definitely be coming up in me. Any other thoughts about feelings that might accompany that? Or physical sensations? What might your body start doing if those thoughts are going to say it's a burglar? What am I going to do? Oh my gosh.
Tensing.
Tensing, yeah. I'm even doing it as I'm talking it, right? So tensing, fist clenching. Okay, and what might you actually do in that situation?
I'd be shit.
Yeah. Wake up the husband. Get up! Get the baseball bat. No, that's not what. Okay, so that's just one example. I guess the common examples for our young people would be, because of the thing I was telling you about referencing to themselves, a lot of it is very much being really self-conscious and having continual, overwhelming thoughts about who they are, whether they're being good at something, self-evaluating all the time. And if we know that all of these things are connected and continuously interacting, then no wonder that sometimes they are going to want to withdraw and not talk to us. And no wonder that sometimes they are going to want to skip school because they've had too much, right? But when it becomes a problem is when that's the case every day or most days of the week. Right.
So what can we do about it? So first of all, what we've got here is the and. So what does and stand for? Firstly, it's just be aware, notice. It's so interesting with that actually sometimes we just, we be happy with just noticing. And so it is sometimes the start of, helping to address the difficulty is just to notice it and be aware of it, okay? And then it's about, okay, what's it doing to my body? Okay, I've had this funny feeling, and now, so what is happening to it, to my body? Is it making me feel sick? Is it making me feel sweaty and clammy or whatever? So it is just considering, being aware, naming what's happening, what's happening, and describe the feeling as well. So for my daughter's case, it was just had this overwhelming, strange feeling. She couldn't really put a name on it. Was able to try and work out a little bit about what was happening in her body, and she needed my help. That might have been her first experience of what jealousy actually feels like. And it's just being able to do that, and it's not about being judgmental about those, those thoughts or those feelings. It's just naming them simply.
Yeah, and I guess what I just wanted to add onto that previous slide was that sometimes I would introduce this aware, name, describe, and almost repeat it really like a parrot, aware, name, describe, this very simple tool to young people that I really want to promote their self-awareness. So young people that really tend to block and have that total disconnect from their actual reflective thinking brains where they're really emotionally distressed, I would give them this as almost the first go-to in order to remind them the things that they need to be looking out for, rather than getting lost in that snowballing of really anxiety-provoking thoughts or just in the feeling or the physical sensation in itself.
And I think it's just being aware when we're working with young people who are experiencing anxiety, actually being able to name what the worry is a little bit, sometimes takes a little bit of work, and it also takes a little bit of testing things out as well. So sometimes it is perhaps if there seems to be a problem or an anxiety around school, it's then, okay, let's try, where does the anxiety really start kicking in? So here on the slide, we've got at the bottom, perhaps seeing a picture of the school. Does that generate any intense, and strong feelings of worry, or give you any strong physical sensations? So if not, it perhaps is not scary. For another young person, that might be actually feels kind of scary. So after you've developed it and allowed the young person to be more aware of the sensation and what's going on, it's testing it out. So seeing a picture of school, perhaps driving to school, what does that do? Does that is that any more scary, or what's than actually going onto the school playground? So it's test it out, because actually sometimes it surprises me an awful lot how much work there needs to be to start unpicking exactly what is the worry about. Because sometimes, particularly when it comes to school, that worry or anxiety might be a social worry, or it might be a worry about academic achievement and functioning. But to start with, often, I just don't want to go to school, it's just horrible, it makes me... so there often is this process that we have to go through.
Yeah, if it's the social worry, just driving past school is not very likely to be really anxiety-provoking. So you're looking out for those little clues that are going to give you a bit more information about what is the root cause here.
Okay, so you're testing out what's, perhaps what is the kind of the significant worry here. And then what we need to start doing is looking at exposure. So what is a good starting point with exposure? For instance, it's human nature, really, that if you're feeling really anxious about something, you're getting all these horrible feelings, that you actually avoid the situation that is anxiety provoking. But as we referenced before about the production of adrenaline, what we know is generally when something is quite a worry, for instance, My example here, having come back from Paris trip in the summer holidays, and I went up to the Eiffel Tower, I know heights is always my an area that I do get significant anxiety about, and I have actually avoided or run away from certain situations that have meant me going up, high buildings and things like that. However, I had booked my ticket to go to the second floor of the Eiffel Tower, and I had some very strong feelings as I was going up. I thought I was going to have to literally get the lifts straight back down. But I tried to practice what I preach, and I stayed with it, okay? I stayed with it, and I noticed significantly, because I have such strong physical sensations. The lift stopped, people got out, I started to panic somewhat, but I focused, did my breathing, we'll come on to that later, and what I noticed that my anxiety then managed to come down, okay? Now, what we tend to do, and what I wanted to do, is at that time when I was in the lift, and I really did want to get the next lift down, my thought was, my anxiety is I'm going to collapse, I'm going to make a fool of myself. I just anticipated, I catastrophized, because that is what anxiety does to the brain. All my logical thinking has gone out the window, and that is what I think has happened. What I have done in the past, I have come out of the situation, and so I've come out of the situation, which immediately, oh my word, this is horrible, I'm going to leave the situation, my anxiety comes down. Well, my anxiety has come down, but my brain hasn't had opportunity to realise, actually, my flood of adrenaline isn't going to go on forever. It is going to come down. It's very expensive. I haven't gone back up to the Eiffel Tower, but I reckon next time there will still be anxiety. It will still go up, but I don't think it will go up as high. And each time I will do that, the anxiety will still be there, but it will be less intense, and it will come down quicker. And this is basically the whole point of why exposure is such an important part of anxiety management. Okay?
And we know that this is what happens because of a multitude of research studies done with so many different clinical populations, done in so many different situations, and we know that exposure is really, really effective in tackling anxiety across the ages, across various cultural differences. We know that this works.
And so one of the things, the example I've got here is a fear hierarchy. So sometimes, once you've done your exploring about what perhaps the anxiety is, it's then thinking around that subject and giving what we call a worry rating to perhaps different things that can involve that worry. So this one about snakes, there is, talking about snakes, does that generates a 3 on the worry rating. So when we use the worry rating, 0 is no worry at all, 10 is really high worry and anxiety. So it's about looking and breaking down possibly the different steps that can be gone through and giving everything a worry rating. Now what we know is actually if your worry rating, it says to touch a rubber snake or to go to a pet shop and hold the snake is a 10 on the worry scale. Let's not start there. If you're going to be scoring a 10, actually that is going to be far too anxiety provoking to start with. So what we want to do is start with the least anxiety provoking, talking about snakes, doing that, and until that 3 turns to about a 0. Okay, so it's having and repeating that same task time and time again, and sometimes obviously it will depend on what the worry is. It can be sometimes more easy to do these kind of fear hierarchies with certain activities. sometimes you have to be really quite creative, and actually, you know, it takes trips out in order for those opportunities to be to sort of come to fruition.
Can I ask a question?
Hello.
Fine. Should exposure be forced?
Well, my thinking is, if it's forced, the young person's got to. There needs to be, the young person needs to want to change, but perhaps the goal and what's wanting to be achieved is too high on the worry rating if it's being forced. That's my sense of when something is being sort of forced.
The reason I'm asking is my son has Asperger's, and for the last 8 months or so, he's been a school refuser. So he's out of his mainstream, he's been placed in the PRU. He's only still, since February, he's been placed in the PRU. We started for an hour a day and we're supposed to build that up to gradually he's comfortable to be there. That hasn't happened. He still really struggles with going to the PRU. After the summer holidays, it seems to have got worse because obviously his Asperger's, he's had that long break and he's really struggling with going. I've been told that it's okay to physically manhandle him to get him there because he needs that exposure.
Now, this is more of a this is obviously an anxiety management talk for neurotypical children rather than young people on the who perhaps are on the autistic spectrum. So I'm sorry if that is a real frustration, if that's a frustration for you. But with regards to if there is a young person with additional needs, I guess I would be questioning, you know, the appropriate, you know, the educational setting.
We're waiting for the EHCP. I've been told that until the EHCP comes through in Hampshire and giving him appropriate education, he has to, every day, be
I guess a question that I'd like to ask you, would you like to be held and taken somewhere? And what if you were autistic? Do you think you'd like that more if you were autistic?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
But
so someone who gives you an answer, doesn't it?
Someone from CAMHS told me that it was okay to do that in an email last week.
Oh dear.
All the shock CAMHS.
I mean, we don't have the context. If you want to have a further talk about it, then absolutely, we're happy. But yes, this is, with regards to anxiety management, this is more, sort of general anxiety management. It changes because there's so many other things at play with a young person on the autistic spectrum, and obviously the sensory processing side as well. That actually, there's so many other things to consider too. So I'm sorry.
Is on the autistic spectrum, although quite mildly, but because of that, we make a conscious choice not to force her to do things that make her exceptionally anxious, especially now it's got quite serious for her physically. So if there's a really anxious situation, like we tried to enroll her in Scouts to try and get her more friends, and she just could not cope, and she went on one nighttime activity and it was awful, awful. So we've taken her away from it, which is a real shame. But I just felt that there's no point putting her through such unbearable suffering for something that most kids would just take for granted, but not.
I guess what sometimes works is pairing each of these steps on the ladder, right? Those broken down tasks with a reward, and as the tasks get more difficult, the reward gets bigger as well, so that lots of young people really buy into that actually. So doing rewards alongside giving those things a go, but it has to be on their terms because they're going to want that change. And yeah, it's really tricky when you know that it's best for them to go to school. It's really tricky when they don't want to, but you try and think about ways to encourage them to give it a go in very small steps perhaps.
And it is, and perhaps it's smaller days, somewhere that's perhaps a time of day that perhaps feels a little bit more sort of comfortable. So it's sometimes playing around with that as well. I'm aware of time. So what can we do to support someone with anxiety? Yes, Christina's gone. Encouragement and praise for managing difficult situations. Use rewards, the efforts and the hard work, because there are some really strong feelings going on and physical sensations that actually, to be able to feel that those that those achievements have been recognised is important. provide reflection, develop insight, model facing fears yourself. To think, for a young person to think that no one else struggles and mum and dad's got it all sorted, isn't realistic. And yes, we're not necessarily suggesting you share your deepest, anxieties and worries, but we all experience things that are perhaps anxiety provoking, and sometimes it's talking through how one feels about something, the physical sensations that situation perhaps triggers, and to normalise it and actually recognise this, anxiety can keep us safe, but we need to make sure it doesn't actually cause us to stop doing things we want to do. The other thing is excessive reassurance, which isn't on here, because we say we want encouragement and praise, but what we do know is too much excessive reassurance around an anxiety-provoking situation can actually be detrimental to the young person. So it's because what the CBT type approach, the exposure, being aware of thoughts, hopefully will generate is for the young person to recognise themselves and be able to give them, reassure themselves. By having mum or dad say, you'll be fine, all the time, can actually then thinking, well, clearly there's something that perhaps might happen if mum or dad or whoever is perhaps giving this excessive reassurance. So it's not, the young people need praise and encouragement, but it's just being self-aware. How much am I giving this reassurance? Am I giving it sometimes when perhaps I shouldn't be? Or should I be perhaps allowing my child to talk through, actually, well, what's likely to happen in this situation? What's a more realistic kind of outcome? Stress reduction. When I was up there at that Eiffel Tower, I can tell you, breathing is amazing. When we are stressed, anxious, or in pain, we know that actually breathing can really, really help. There's a tendency that when distressed, our breathing becomes less effective, and we either breathe too deeply, or we breathe in, we breathe too shallow. Wrong term, sorry. But what we have is what we call square breathing. So it's just something to visualise. When I perhaps in a situation, I'll look at something with four corners, a window. I will breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4, and repeat that. What that is doing is not only sending the message to the brain that adrenaline doesn't need to be produced at the moment, it also is giving my mind something else to focus on as well. It's a mindful activity. Suddenly, I'm focusing on my breathing and that sensation rather than that horrible feeling or the jelly legs or the sore tummy. So breathing is really, really powerful. We've also got the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, which is a grounding technique. So 5 things to look at. So when distressed, look around the room and encourage the young person to look around the room and name 5 things that they can see, 4 things that they can feel, 3 things they can hear, 2 they can smell, 1 that they can taste. And again, that is a mindful activity that kind of brings the senses back to the here and now, away from the catastrophizing. There are some really good apps. If you go to the CAMHS store, there are lots of apps that you can put on your phone, things like Headspace, Smiling Mind, and they are apps that talk you through some of these strategies.
And I guess the thinking strategies I'm going to whiz through them, but please feel free to go to our stall and ask us questions afterwards. But some of the cognitive things that you can do and try to introduce changes would be, as we spoke earlier, identifying the worry, getting really to the bottom of what it actually is related with, encouraging the young person to question the accuracy of their worrying thoughts. Is that a realistic thought? That if I go to school, I'm just going to be sick straight away and everyone's going to laugh. How likely is that going to happen? So really, really unpick what is the probability. Has it happened to someone else? What would your best friend think about that? So they're really good questions to be asking your young person. So if always or never a part of the thoughts, are there times when it isn't happening? Why is it not happening then? So really getting them to think about the nitty-gritty of those situations. And I can actually appreciate that sometimes they might shut down when you try to have those conversations, because just thinking about the anxiety-provoking things provokes anxiety. But that's okay. Take time out, take some space, have a cup of tea, chill a little bit, and then maybe pick it up from where you left it. It's really important to have those discussions, and particularly after a really stressful and anxiety-provoking event has happened. They're not going to be able to talk to you about it whilst they're distressed, because that's not how the brain works. Those parts of the brain that keep our rational thinking are totally disconnected when we're in that headspace of real anxiety. But once they've calmed down and they feel safe and they feel okay, and to some extent able to talk to you, that's when we'd encourage you to have those conversations with them. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for this video, but if you put into YouTube a young person's experience of mental health, you can watch it. It's about 1.5 minutes, and there's some young people talking about their lived experience of anxiety. And as we said, we've got lots of resources on our CAMHS stall in the main room. Please come along and help yourself to some of those brochures. One book particularly relevant in our practice day to day is this one by Cathy Cresswell, who's a researcher at the a therapist at the University of Reading, and her team have been developing these cognitive behaviour therapy rooted practices for helping parents help their children to manage anxiety, and it's absolutely amazing. It reiterates lots of the points that we've spoken about today, but goes into much more detail and many more practical tips. So that's a brilliant resource. For the younger ones, this is a really good book as well. Worrying Too Much, what to do when you worry too much, that's amazing. And it's got some really nice analogies, like when you water a plant, and if the tomato plant is a metaphor for anxiety, the more you water it, the bigger it grows. And yeah, just some really, really nice things. And then we have another leaflet. It's a green leaflet on our stall which gives you all of these if you wanted to take some of those away. And is there any questions, please?